My head felt like it had been split open with an axe. When I opened my eyes, the bedroom was shrouded in darkness, save for the low, amber glow of the nightlight. Its orange light flickered over an empty walk-in closet. The custom gown wasn't there, the champagne-colored silk dress embroidered with hand-sewn micro-diamonds that I had prepared for tonight's Sterling Group charity gala. It had taken 3 months to ship directly from a Paris atelier, but now it was gone. Gone, too, were my diamond drop earrings, my platinum wedding band, and the gold-embossed invitation. Everything had vanished without a trace. I pushed against the edge of the mattress, trying to sit up, but my limbs felt like lead, as though every bone had been drained from my body. The back of my neck was numb, and a strange metallic bitterness coated my tongue. "Ma'am, you're awake?" Mrs. Gable, our housekeeper, hurried into the room holding a glass of warm water. Her face was pale, tight with worry. "What time is it?" I rasped, my throat raw. "Almost 8 o'clock. Mrs. Gable handed me the glass, her hands trembling subtly. "Miss Sienna," she put on your dress and left with Mr. Sterling. My knuckles turned white around the glass. "She said you weren't feeling well," Mrs. Gable continued, her voice dropping to a whisper. "She told Mr. Sterling that you asked her to go in your place. He didn't even ask a question. He just helped her into the town car." A sudden memory flashed through the fog in my mind. Just 2 hours ago, Sienna had walked into my room carrying a mug of artisanal bone broth, smiling with sweet, sisterly concern. "Vivian, honey, you look so pale," she had murmured. "Drink this and rest a little." And I had trusted her. Or rather, I had never imagined she would be so brazen, so reckless. Sienna Montgomery had lived under our roof for 2 years. We had been sorority sisters at Columbia. After graduation, she spent years struggling to make rent, begging me to find her an opening. Pitying her, I pulled strings to get her an administrative position at Sterling Group. From there, she maneuvered her way into becoming Alistair's executive assistant. Soon after, she began wearing the clothes I bought, spraying my signature perfume, and stepping onto red carpets arm in arm with my husband. Everyone in our social circle knew what was happening. I was the only fool still clinging to a marriage that had rotted from the inside out long ago. "Don't be angry, ma'am," Mrs. Gable said softly. "Young Mr. Tristan was just here. He left something for you on the nightstand." I looked down. On the mahogany surface lay an index card. Tristan's handwriting sharp, precise, devoid of the hesitation typical of an 18-year-old boy. "Mom, don't be afraid. The show is just getting started." In the corner, he had drawn a small chess diagram. "Queen takes king." I stared at those words for a long time. Tristan had never been a normal kid. Ever since he turned 13, he had sat in the corner of Alistair's corner office during every executive board meeting. At 15, he drafted his first venture capital pitch. By 17, he had cleared $10 million trading options on Wall Street. Alistair never realized what kind of prodigy he was raising. His mind was consumed by quarterly earnings, cold metrics, and net profits. Whenever he came home, he barely glanced at his son, muttered a word or two about high school, and went back to exchanging filthy text messages with Sienna. He never understood Tristan. He never tried to. My phone buzzed on the bed. A text from Tristan containing a livestream link. I tapped it. The screen illuminated with a crisp 4K broadcast, the annual Sterling Group charity gala at the St. Regis, New York. The camera panned across the grand ballroom entrance. And then I saw Alistair. He looked imposing in a charcoal bespoke tuxedo that emphasized his broad shoulders and commanding stature. His face was a mask of cool detachment, carrying that familiar, aloof smile. And clinging to his arm was Sienna. She was wearing my dress. The champagne train swept elegantly across the marble floor. Under the harsh glare of the press flashes, my stolen heirloom emerald bracelet and wedding band dazzled the photographers. Sienna held her chin high, preening like a crow in peacock feathers, nodding graciously to every high society guest who approached. "Mrs. Sterling, you look absolutely divine tonight." Mr. and Mrs. Sterling, what a breathtaking couple. I listened to those sycophantic voices through the phone speaker, each word striking my chest like a dull blade. Alistair didn't correct a single person. He even leaned down, whispering something into Sienna's ear that made her cover her mouth and burst into a flirtatious laugh. Her eyes gleamed with triumphant malice. "Mom, you okay?" Tristan's voice broke the silence. I raised my head to see him leaning against the doorframe. He wore a simple white button-down with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows, revealing the lean, wiry arms of a teenager. In his hands, he held an iPad where financial tickers flickered endlessly. "Why aren't you there?" I asked quietly. "Why watch that woman humiliate us?" Tristan raised an eyebrow, walked over, and sat at the edge of the mattress. He handed me the tablet. "Take a look." On the screen was an encrypted directory filled with meticulously organized folders. High-resolution photos, surveillance videos, wire transfer receipts. I opened one file and gasped. They were timestamped photos from last month showing Sienna entering a boutique hotel in Miami with a young, handsome man I didn't recognize. I opened another file. Bank statements showing a hidden transfer of $3.8 million from Alistair's personal account to an offshore entity in the Cayman Islands. Then I opened a voice memo. It was a recording of a phone call between Sienna and a private investigator. She was asking if there was a compound that could cause a middle-aged woman to fade away quietly without raising suspicious blood panels. A cold shiver raced down my spine. Where did you get all this?" Tristan offered a faint, soft smile, but deep within his dark eyes was a chill that could freeze fire. "I told you, Mom. I play chess." He took the tablet back. "I've seen their moves coming from miles away. I was just waiting." "Waiting for what?" "For them to corner themselves." Tristan stood up, walking to the floor-to-ceiling window to stare out at the glowing Manhattan skyline. "For 2 years, I watched you endure his disrespect, swallowing your pride for the sake of keeping the peace. I didn't step in because I knew you weren't ready to let go." He turned around, his eyes burning with an intense adult resolve. "Tell me, Mom, are you ready now?" I looked down at the live stream on my phone. Sienna was standing at the center of the ballroom, raising a flute of Dom Perignon toward the cameras while holding Alistair's arm. Her face radiated ruthless triumph. While I lay here in the home I helped build, drugged, robbed, stripped of my dignity, turned into a silent joke. 2 years. For 2 long years I had told myself, for my son, for the family, I just need to endure a little longer. Now I finally saw the truth. Some things cannot be saved by endurance. "I'm ready," I said. My voice was barely above a whisper, but it didn't shake. Tristan smiled. He pulled out his phone, dialed a speed dial entry, and uttered 3 words. "Execute the plan." Hanging up, he extended a hand to me. "Get up, Mom. Change your clothes. Tonight, you and I are going to finish this play." On the live stream screen, the ballroom lights suddenly dimmed. A single spotlight snapped onto the main stage as the auctioneer stepped up to the microphone, beaming as he announced the start of the charity auction. And I knew that from this moment on, everything was about to change. Chapter 2. The 18-year-old Night. When Tristan said execute the plan, I didn't yet grasp the sheer magnitude of those words. He steadied me as I got out of bed. "Mrs." Gable brought up a small bowl of clear chicken broth, unspoiled this time. I managed a few spoonfuls, and slowly, the warmth returned to my limbs. Tristan sat beside me the entire time, his long fingers flying across his iPad, occasionally pausing to send encrypted messages. He was as calm as a 4-star general reviewing a battle map. "What are you doing?" I asked. "Closing out the game," Tristan replied without looking up. "Mom, while you were unconscious for the last 2 hours, a lot of dominoes fell." He tilted the screen toward me. It displayed a string of wire transfers from Alistair's private accounts ranging from hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars. The beneficiary was a shell corporation registered in Shell Beach, Shell Offshore, but the ultimate beneficial owner was Sienna. "She thought she was being clever," Tristan said smoothly, "so she routed the funds through a private Swiss institution. What she didn't realize is that I purchased a minority voting stake in that exact private bank last year." I froze. "You." "What?" "Last year?" Tristan chuckled softly. "Mom, you didn't think I spent all those hours in my room playing video games, did you?" I stared at my son. The crisp white shirt, the simple mechanical watch on his wrist, my 18th birthday gift to him. He bore a striking resemblance to a young Alistair, but his eyes were infinitely clearer, deeper, and far more dangerous. "What else did she do?" I asked, my blood running cold. "Plenty." Tristan swiped to a new file. On top of draining marital assets, she hired a private detective to tail you. He took photos of you having lunch with corporate clients or shaking hands with male colleagues, cropping them to make it look like you were having affairs, then feeding them to Dad. I was speechless. Dad believed it, or rather, he wanted to believe it so he could justify his own betrayals, Tristan continued, his voice steady despite the fury tightly suppressed beneath it, and Sienna handed him the excuse on a silver platter. She kept track of your travel itineraries, your hotel bookings, your client meetings. She was laying the groundwork to have you cast out of the family with nothing. I let out a bitter laugh. Tristan set the tablet aside and looked at me with absolute gravity. Mom, there's something else. You need to brace yourself. Tell me. In the recording between Sienna and that detective, she asked about a specific pharmaceutical, Tristan said slowly. A slow-acting, untraceable toxin that mimics natural organ failure over a 90-day period. The detective hooked her up with an underground broker. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. She bought 2 things from them, Tristan revealed, pointing to a forensic lab receipt on his screen. The first was the heavy sedative she put in your broth tonight. The second, she hasn't used yet. It's a slow-acting poison designed to trigger a fatal cardiac arrest. My fingers trembled not out of fear, but out of pure, unadulterated rage. 2 years of friendship. 2 years of opening my home to her, giving her a career, giving her dignity, and in return, she was calmly plotting my murder. She wanted you out of the picture before Dad brought you the marital settlement agreement, Tristan added. Dad didn't know about the poison, but he did know about the settlement. He planned to bring Sienna home tonight and force you to sign away your rights. I almost laughed out loud. I, Vivian Vance, had spent 32 years hurting no one. I was faithful to my husband, dedicated to my son, and devoted to our home. And in the end, they didn't even want to leave me alive. Fine, I said, standing up on steady legs. Let them try. Mom? Tristan looked up at me. They want me to sign away my rights? Let them come. I walked into the walk-in closet, stepped past the empty garment rack, and opened my private safe. I pulled out a leather-bound legal binder. They have no idea what I've been holding on to. Inside the binder were complete records of Alistair's corporate malfeasance, along with our original prenuptial agreement. When Alistair first started Sterling Group, it was nothing more than an empty shell with a pitch deck. My father, a legendary corporate attorney, provided the seed capital. And my father made sure Alistair signed an ironclad, airtight agreement. If Alistair Sterling engaged in marital infidelity, 51% of all voting shares in Sterling Group would automatically transfer to me and my son. That contract is legally bulletproof, Tristan said, a faint smile touching his lips. Grandpa drafted it himself. He was the sharpest civil litigator in the state. Tristan stood up. He had grown so much his shoulders broad, his stature towering over mine. He was no longer just my boy. He was a man capable of standing as my shield. So, tonight is the final act, Tristan said. Are you ready, Mom? I'm ready. Tristan stepped forward and wrapped his arms around me in a brief, firm hug. It made my eyes sting. For 2 years, I hadn't shed a single tear in front of anyone, not even my child. But feeling his strength now, I realized that my long silence had never gone unnoticed. Listen to me, Mom, Tristan whispered near my ear. Tonight, I'm going to make sure everyone learns the exact price of hurting you. He stepped back and speed-dialed our driver. Hank, bring the Suburban around to the front. My mother is heading out. Where to, Mr. Tristan? Hank asked over the speaker. Tristan looked at me, the corner of his mouth curving upward. To the party. On the gala livestream, the event was reaching its climax. The auctioneer's booming voice filled the venue as he presented the evening's centerpiece, a vintage platinum and emerald necklace from the 1920s. An exquisite piece gifted by a tycoon to his wife, the auctioneer grandly announced, and now donated tonight by Mrs. Sienna Sterling. Interesting, Tristan muttered, watching the feed. Mom, that's your lot. I know. I stepped out of the dressing room. I wasn't wearing a fragile haute couture dress. Instead, I wore a tailored, midnight black pantsuit over a crisp white silk blouse, paired with pointed stiletto heels, minimalist, sharp, and commanding. I didn't need anyone's approval anymore. Let's go, Tristan said, opening the door and offering his arm. Tonight, you're the main character. We walked downstairs and stepped out into the crisp night air. The city lights below sparkled like a fallen constellation, while in the distance, a beam of light cut into the clouds above Manhattan from the roof of the street. Regis. Hank opened the door of the black SUV. Tristan helped me inside before sliding into the seat beside me. Head to the street, Regis, Hank. Pull into the private service bay around the back. Got it, Mr. Tristan. Hank shifted into drive, and the heavy vehicle glided out of our gated Greenwich estate, merging smoothly into the highway traffic. Streetlights flashed across Tristan's sharp profile as he made another call. Nico, is the feed ready? All set, boss, a deep voice replied through the car speakers. We've intercepted the main broadcast feed. The secondary stream is primed to override their house system on your mark. Perfect. Stand by. Tristan hung up and dialed another number. Mr. Vance, do you have the original contract? Right here in my briefcase, Tristan, replied Arthur Vance, my late father's former senior partner. With the clause your grandfather wrote, Alistair Sterling doesn't stand a prayer. Excellent. Tristan ended the call and turned to me. Mom, when we arrive, wait in the green room behind the main stage. I'll signal when it's time for you to walk out. What are you planning to do? I asked. You'll see. Tristan let out a low chuckle. Do you trust me, Mom? I looked into his eyes so clear, so fearless. With my life. The SUV turned off Fifth Avenue, slipping quietly into the shadowed service alley behind the street Regis. Several black vans with dark-tinted windows were already idling there. Tristan stepped out, holding the door for me. Come on, Mom, he said softly. I've been setting up this chessboard for 2 years. It's time for checkmate. Chapter 3. The Imposter's Triumph. The SUV idling in the shadow of the service bay was dead silent. Tristan kept his iPad resting on his knees. Its screen split into 6 live surveillance angles feeds from inside the street live. In-def. Regis Ballroom. I didn't ask how he had hacked into the hotel's secure network. At this point, nothing he did surprised me. Look here, Mom. Tristan enlarged the top left quadrant. The camera was zoomed in on table 1, the head table. Sienna was seated at the center, flanked by Alistair on her left, and 3 senior board members of Sterling Group on her right. She had her legs crossed, dangling a designer heel, holding a crystal flute of champagne while animatedly speaking to a silver-haired gentleman. She acted so effortlessly entitled, as though she had been born into this world of old money and corporate power. The silver-haired man was Leonard Sterling, Alistair's uncle, the second-largest shareholder in the company, and an old friend of my late father. I watched as Leonard frowned slightly, leaning back against his chair in visible distaste, trying to distance himself from her chatter. But Sienna, completely oblivious, kept talking, even reaching out to pat his shoulder condescendingly. Does she really think no one notices whose dress she's wearing? I said coldly. Oh, she knows, Tristan replied smoothly. That's why she wore it. On screen, the auctioneer announced a brief intermission before the final bidding war. The ballroom lights brightened, and guests began mingling, clinking glasses. Sienna took Alistair's arm, and together they began working the room like a royal couple. Alistair, darling, who is your lovely companion? An older society matriarch in a burgundy gown asked as they approached her table. Before Alistair could even open his mouth, Sienna cut in with a practiced, dazzling smile. I'm Alistair's wife, Sienna. You must be Victoria. Alistair speaks of you so often. I gripped my seat. Victoria Sterling Vane knew me well. We had served on the botanical garden board together just last year. Her face visibly tightened as she shot Alistair a sharp, questioning look. Alistair didn't correct Sienna. He merely offered a faint, strained smile and murmured, Sienna is accompanying me tonight. It was just ambiguous enough to avoid a direct lie while giving Sienna all the room she needed to play the triumphant wife. Look at Dad's face, Mom, Tristan noted, zooming in on Alistair's expression. Alistair was smiling, but the smile never reached his eyes. His gaze kept darting nervously toward the main doors, scanning the crowd as if expecting a ghost. He's terrified, Tristan analyzed coolly. He knows how important this gala was to you. He knows you wouldn't miss it voluntarily, yet you haven't shown up. He's waiting for you to burst in and make a scene. He thinks I'm going to cause a public embarrassment? No, Tristan shook his head. He's hoping you do. If you storm in screaming, He can paint you as an hysterical, unstable ex-wife having a mental breakdown. He could use that to push you into a psychiatric facility and sweep the asset division under the rug. But if you don't show up, he thinks you've finally been broken. Tristan looked at me, a dangerous glint in his eyes. What he forgot is that there's a third option. Which is? You don't make a scene, Tristan smiled. We make a statement. He switched the camera feed to the private corridor near the green room. Arthur Vance was standing there in a charcoal suit, holding a thick, red wax-sealed legal folio. Arthur Vance has been waiting in that hallway for almost 3 hours, Tristan said. He told me he would wait all night if he had to. He said he owes Grandpa a debt he can never fully repay. Tristan closed the tablet and turned to me. Mom, you're going to take the service elevator up to the 3rd floor. Mr. Vance is waiting outside. He'll guide you to the stage wings. What about you? I'm taking the front entrance, Tristan grinned. In that moment, the boyishness completely vanished from his face, replaced by the apex predator he had become. He stepped out of the SUV, nodded to me through the tinted glass, and walked toward the fleet of black vans parked nearby. The side doors slid open, revealing a team of suited men forensic accountants, private security detail, and media handlers. Someone handed Tristan a dark garment bag. It's time. Mrs. Sterling Hank said gently from the driver's seat. I took a deep breath, opened the door, and stepped into the cool night air. Looking up at the illuminated spire of the Street Regis, I felt no fear, only an icy, crystalline clarity. I hadn't come here tonight to reclaim a throne. I had come to burn it to the ground. I took the service elevator up in silence. The brass-mirrored walls reflected my reflection. Clean lines, sharp tailoring, midnight black pantsuit. Sienna had stolen my dress, my diamonds, and my emeralds, but she couldn't steal who I was. When the elevator doors chimed open on the 3rd floor, Arthur Vance was standing right there. Seeing me, the veteran attorney's eyes grew faintly red. Vivian, he murmured softly. Arthur, I nodded. I tried to see you 3 times this past month, Arthur said, his voice thick with emotion. Alistair blocked me at the gate every time, claiming you were resting. The second time, that woman answered the door and told me you were too sick to receive counsel. And today, he looked at my posture, my clear eyes. Today, you're finally standing on your own 2 feet. I held out my hand. Do you have the contract? Arthur pulled the yellowed parchment from his folio. The paper was decades old, but the typography was crisp, bearing my father's unmistakable, razor-sharp legal drafting. When your father forced Alistair to sign this 20 years ago, Alistair didn't dare object, Arthur recalled. Your father told him, if you love my daughter honorably, this contract will gather dust forever. But he didn't love you honorably. No, I agreed quietly. He didn't. I turned to the signature page. Alistair's signature was pressed so hard into the paper that it had embossed the reverse side a testament to his hidden resentment even back then. Is all the evidence secured? I asked. Every scrap, Arthur pulled out a second massive binder. Bank statements, shell company registries, wire logs, video footage, and the sworn affidavit from the private investigator. He turned himself in to my firm this afternoon and confessed to everything. He confessed voluntarily? Tristan found him. Arthur smiled grimly. Your son is terrifyingly brilliant, Vivian. He didn't threaten the man physically. He simply laid out a dossier containing the exact school schedule of the investigator's daughter, her favorite coffee shop, and her daily commute. And then said, you have a family, and I have a mother. I don't want to hurt your family, so tell the truth. The man broke down on his knees. My heart hammered against my ribs. Tristan had done all of that completely on his own. The boy I had nursed, the boy I had walked to kindergarten, had turned into a lethal blade while I was looking the other way. Let's go, Arthur said, checking his gold pocket watch. The auction is concluding. Tristan said the auction is the optimal moment. Why? Because that's when everyone is paying attention. We walked down the carpeted hallway toward the grand double doors leading to the ballroom wings. Through the heavy wood, I could hear the muted swell of smooth jazz, the clinking of crystal, and the hollow chatter of Manhattan's elite. Arthur squeezed my shoulder reassuringly. Stand here in the wings. Wait for your cue. I took a deep, steadying breath as the stage curtains shielded me from view. Through the gap, I could see Sienna standing near the podium, glowing under the spotlights, holding Alistair's hand like a queen expecting a crown. She had no idea the real play was about to begin. Chapter 4. The Prince's Entranceth. The ballroom lights abruptly plunged into darkness. A single blinding spotlight snapped onto the center stage, illuminating the master of ceremonies. And now, ladies and gentlemen, the grand finale of our charity auction. The auctioneer announced into his microphone, his polished voice echoing through the state-of-the-art sound system. Our final lot of the evening, generously donated by the wife of Mr. Alistair Sterling, a museum-grade 1920s Art Deco emerald and diamond necklace. Bidding starts at $5 million. Applause erupted across the room. Every pair of eyes turned towards Sienna. She stood beside Alistair, tilting her head with an practiced, regal smile. She rested her hand delicately on Alistair's forearm, ensuring the stolen emerald bracelet on her wrist caught the light just so. "We thank Mrs. Sterling for her extraordinary philanthropy," the auctioneer gushed. "Mrs. Sterling, would you care to say a few words?" Sienna glanced at Alistair, who gave her a brief, approving nod. Gathering the train of my champagne gown, her stolen heels clicking against the hardwood stage, she glided up to the podium. The spotlight tracked her every move. She adjusted the microphone and cleared her throat, her voice dripping with calculated sweetness. "Thank you, everyone. This necklace was personally selected by my husband for tonight's cause. Our family has always believed in giving back to the community, and we hope these funds will make a meaningful impact." Standing in the shadows of the stage wings, listening to her repeat "my husband and our family," a wave of nausea washed over me. "So gracious, so generous," the auctioneer praised. "Let us begin the bidding." "Do I hear 6 million? Paddles went up immediately. 6 million. "Do I hear 7? 7 million to the gentleman in the front." Sienna stood beside the podium, soaking in the admiration, her smile growing more insufferable by the second. And then, the massive oak doors at the back of the grand ballroom were thrown wide open. The heavy doors slammed against the brass stops with a deafening crash that silenced the entire room. Hundreds of heads turned in unison. Standing in the doorway was Tristan. He had changed out of his casual shirt. Now, he wore a bespoke midnight navy three-piece suit that broadened his shoulders and tapered sharply at his waist. Around his neck was the deep burgundy silk tie I had given him for his 18th birthday, the one he promised to wear only on the most important day of his life. Flanking him were 4 imposing men in dark suits, their posture erect, their eyes cold. A stunned hush fell over the venue, followed by a sudden ripple of whispers. Isn't that Alistair Sterling's son? What is he doing here? He never attends these galas." Alistair's face hardened instantly. His eyebrows pulled together into a thunderous scowl, his lips pressing into a thin line. He made a move to step forward and cut Tristan off, but Tristan didn't even grant him a glance. Tristan's icy gaze swept across the crowd, locking directly onto Sienna standing frozen on stage. He offered a ghost of a smile, then took a step forward. He walked down the center aisle, striding past rows of Manhattan's most powerful figures under their bewildered stares. "Tristan, what the hell are you doing?" Alistair's low, furious voice cut through the silence as he intercepted him near the stage steps. Tristan stopped, turning his head slightly to look at his father. His eyes were as cold as deep space. "Father," he said calmly, his voice carrying effortlessly, "I'm here to help you." Alistair blinked, caught off guard. Tristan didn't wait for a response. He walked right past his father, stepped up the stage stairs, and walked toward the podium. The auctioneer froze, completely at a loss. "May I borrow the microphone?" Tristan asked with polite authority. Of course, Mr. Sterling," the auctioneer stammered, handing it over instinctively. Tristan took the mic and stepped up to the center of the stage, standing right beside Sienna. Sienna's composure cracked instantly. Her smile panicked, her eyes darting wildly toward Alistair below. She tried to step back, but the spotlight locked onto both of them, trapping her. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen," Tristan began, his voice deep, clear, and ringing with absolute control through the speakers. "Thank you for attending the Sterling Group Charity Gala. For those who do not know me, my name is Tristan Vance. I am the son of Mr. Alistair Sterling." He paused deliberately on the words, "son of Mr. Alistair Sterling," letting the weight settle over the audience. "Since childhood, I have legally carried my mother's maiden name," Tristan added casually. The room gasped. "Carries his mother's name? Then who is the woman standing next to him? Tristan turned toward Sienna, his smile deceptively gentle. And to you, Aunt Sienna, I want to extend my deepest gratitude. Sienna paled. Alistair froze at the bottom of the stairs. Thank you for stepping into proxy for my mother tonight, Tristan said, as if reading a polite speech. Thank you for putting on my mother's dress, wearing my mother's fine jewelry, and standing here in her place to fulfill her social duties. Every word sounded like a compliment, yet every word landed like a sledgehammer. A loud murmur erupted across the floor. Wait, she's not Mrs. Sterling? I knew something was off. I've met Vivian Sterling. She looks nothing like this woman. Is that his mistress wearing his wife's clothes? Sienna's face flushed a deep, mottled red. She parted her lips to speak. But Tristan didn't give her an inch. Ladies and gentlemen, Tristan continued, turning back to the crowd, his tone shifting to sharp authority. I apologize that you were made to witness an imposter on this stage tonight. The word imposter exploded like a grenade. Sienna swayed on her high heels, barely maintaining her balance. Tristan, have you lost your mind? Alistair finally roared, charging up the stage stairs, his face contorted in rage. Get off that stage right now. Don't rush, father, Tristan said coolly, holding out a hand to stop him in his tracks. I have a few formal announcements to make. He raised the microphone again, speaking with crisp, chilling precision. Regarding the illicit relationship between my father, Mr. Alistair Sterling, and this woman, Sienna Montgomery, I have compiled complete documentation. Tonight, I present 3 legal instruments. Tristan pulled a thick manila envelope from his inner jacket pocket. First, a comprehensive forensic dossier detailing every instance of my father's marital infidelity over the past 2 years. A collective gasp echoed through the room. Second, certified bank records proving that Miss Montgomery has illegally embezzled $3.8 million of marital assets into offshore accounts. Sienna's face went dead white. And third, Tristan raised a yellowed document with a red wax seal for the room and cameras to see. The original prenuptial agreement, executed 20 years ago by my late grandfather, Arthur Vance Sr., and signed personally by my father. Under Section 4, Paragraph B of this agreement, in the event of marital infidelity, 51% of all voting shares in Sterling Group automatically revert to the sole ownership of my mother, Vivian Vance, and myself. Dead, suffocating silence gripped the grand ballroom. And then, like a dam bursting, the room exploded. Reporters scrambled forward. Flashbulbs went off in a blinding frenzy, and board members leaped from their seats in shock. Camera lenses locked onto Tristan, onto the staggering Alistair, and onto the trembling Mistress on stage. Security! Cut the lights! Kill the broadcast feed! Alistair bellowed frantically toward the control booth. They won't cut it, father, Tristan said softly into the mic. Tonight's broadcast isn't running on the hotel's network. It's being routed through a private satellite array. Right now, over 3 million people are watching this live across the country. Alistair turned ash gray. You little. Tristan lowered the mic, stepped off the podium, and walked up to his father. He leaned in, his voice dropping so low that only Alistair could hear. My mother waited 2 years for this night, Tristan whispered. He reached out and gently patted Alistair's shoulder, a gesture mocking a father comforting a child. Everything you owe her, you return tonight. Tristan turned back to the crowd, raising the mic one last time, a brilliant, youthful smile breaking across his face. Ladies and gentlemen, the auction will now proceed. However, the donor of this emerald necklace must be corrected. It was not donated by Mrs. Sterling. Tristan pointed toward the stage wings. It was donated by Vivian Vance. The velvet curtains parted. The spotlight swung wide. And there I stood. Chapter 5. Auntie's Gratitude. The moment the light caught me, the ballroom fell so quiet you could hear the champagne bubbles popping in the crystal flutes. I stood at the edge of the stage in my tailored black suit. No dramatic ball gown, no heavy makeup, just flawless, tailoring and bold, blood-red lipstick that served as a sharp, uncompromising exclamation point. Behind me stood senior counsel Arthur Vance, holding his leather briefcase like a fortress. The eyes of Manhattan high society darted back and forth between Sienna and me. One woman stood in her own clothes, unadorned yet unbowed. The other stood draped in stolen luxury, trembling like a leaf. Who was the real matriarch and who was the fraud was instantly glaringly obvious. That's Vivian Vance, the real Mrs. Sterling. My God! The mistress actually wore the wife's custom dress to a public gala? Alistair Sterling must have lost his damned mind. The whispers rolled through the crowd like a tidal wave. I heard them, but I didn't care. My gaze swept past the sea of faces, locking onto Tristan standing on stage. He gave me a subtle, knowing nod, a faint smirk touching his lips that said, "Your stage, Mom." I stepped into the light. The sharp click of my stilettos against the polished floor was steady, rhythmic, and deliberate. Click. 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 Each step sounded like a countdown to doom. The crowd parted instantly, clearing a path for me. Guests who had been fawning over Sienna moments ago pulled their heads down, terrified to meet my eye. Alistair stood at the base of the stage stairs, his face as pale as parchment. His lips moved, trying to form my name, but no sound came out. I didn't give him a second glance. I walked straight up the stairs. Tristan extended his hand, his warm, strong grip steadying me as I stepped onto the platform. He gave my hand a reassuring squeeze before stepping back to give me the floor. Sienna stood trapped near the podium, caught between running and hiding. The smug triumph on her face had been completely replaced by naked terror. Her lower lip quivered as she looked at me. Vivian, she whimpered. Don't call me Vivian, I said coldly. My voice wasn't loud, but Tristan held the microphone close, amplifying my words across the entire hall. Sienna flinched backward, her stolen heel catching the hem of my stolen dress. She stumbled, nearly falling flat on her face. No one moved to catch her. The very socialites she had been drinking with minutes ago watched her with disgust. Tristan handed me the mic. I took it, turned toward the hundreds of blinding flashbulbs, and looked directly into the news cameras. Good evening. I am Vivian Vance. Just 6 words, but the reaction was deafening. Camera shutters clicked in a frantic unison. Reporters pushed past security to reach the edge of the stage, hungry for the scandal of the decade. Mrs. Vance, what is your statement regarding tonight's revelations? Are you filing for divorce immediately? Is it true Sterling Group's controlling shares have been transferred? Tristan stepped in front of me, raising a hand to command order. Silence, please. My mother will answer questions in due time. But first, we have business to finalize. He turned to me and held out his hand. Mom. The petition. I reached into my blazer's inner pocket and pulled out the legal document I had signed in the back of the SUV on the ride over. My signature was bold, crisp, and permanent at the bottom of the page. Tristan took the document, unfolded it, and held it up facing the press cameras. This is a formal petition for the dissolution of marriage, executed by my mother, Vivian Vance. As of tonight, her marriage to Mr. Alistair Sterling is effectively over. The room gasped again. Furthermore, Tristan raised his voice over the noise. Regarding the 3 legal filings I mentioned, allow me to present the official record. He pulled out the first document. First, verified proof of Alistair Sterling's continuous infidelity over 2 years, complete with hotel logs, travel receipts, and witness statements. Alistair's face drained of what little color remained. Second, Tristan displayed the financial audit. Over the past 6 months, Miss Sienna Montgomery embezzled $3.8 million through 3 offshore shell entities across 17 fraudulent transactions. That's a lie, Sienna shrieked hysterically. You framed me! You're making this up! Ignoring her completely, Tristan raised the final, yellowed parchment. And third, the original 2004 prenuptial agreement. It clearly stipulates that in the event of marital betrayal, 51% of all voting shares in Sterling Group immediately transferred to my mother and myself. Tristan held all 3 documents high under the spotlight. All 3 filings have been certified and submitted to the court. Mr. Vance? Arthur Vance stepped up to the center of the stage, opening his leather briefcase. I am Arthur Vance, managing partner at Vance & Associates. I personally confirm the authenticity and immediate legal enforceability of all 3 instruments. When one of the top corporate litigators in the country makes a public declaration on live television, there is no room left for doubt. The ballroom descended into utter chaos. Cries of disbelief, furious hushed phone calls to brokerages, and non-stop camera flashes created a deafening roar. Tristan reclaimed the microphone and turned slowly to Sienna. Aunt Sienna, he said with terrifying politeness. Sienna shuddered as if struck by lightning. I told you I wanted to thank you, Tristan said, looking down at her. Thank you for standing in for my mother tonight. After all, these society galas are terribly exhausting. It's nice to have a temporary substitute. Sienna's lips trembled uncontrollably. However, Tristan's tone turned ice cold. Since you enjoy taking my mother's place beside my father so much, I think it's only fair to grant you your wish. He turned back to the room, his voice booming through the sound system. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of my mother, Vivian Vance, I hereby announce that as of 7 o'clock tonight, all of Mr. Alistair Sterling's primary credit accounts have been cancelled. His personal assets have been frozen by court order pending an emergency audit for asset diversion. What? Alistair finally found his voice, taking a heavy step forward. His face dark with rage. Tristan, how dare you? Father. Tristan looked down at him with serene detachment. You no longer hold controlling interest in Sterling Group. Under Grandpa's contract, effective immediately, control of the board belongs to my mother. Every personal account, credit line, and real estate deed under your name is frozen as security for the impending lawsuit. The only money you have left is whatever cash is currently in your wallet. Tristan turned back to Sienna with a warm, terrifying smile. So, Aunt Sienna, thank you for agreeing to take care of him. My father is officially your financial responsibility now. A dead, suffocating silence gripped the room. And then, someone in the front row burst out laughing. Like falling dominoes, giggles and hushed laughter rippled across the ballroom. High society ladies covered their mouths. Prominent executives turned away, their shoulders shaking with uncontrollable amusement. The very people who had been groveling to Alistair moments ago were now laughing at him the hardest. Sienna's face turned from pale to a hideous crimson. I didn't. She stumbled backward, her heels snagging on the dress again, and this time, she crashed hard onto the stage floor. The champagne gown billowed around her like ruined trash. Stolen diamonds sparkled under the lights, but the woman wearing them looked utterly pathetic. Didn't you say you loved him? Tristan asked gently, looking down at her. You just called yourself Mrs. Sterling. Surely Mrs. Sterling can afford to support Mr. Sterling? Sienna opened her mouth, but not a single sound came out. For 2 years, she had clawed her way up, wearing stolen clothes, dripping in stolen luxury, desperate to play the billionaire's wife. Now, Alistair was broke, and her victory had turned into a catastrophic farce. One last detail, Tristan said into the mic. The donor of tonight's final auction lot is officially updated to Vivian Vance. This vintage emerald necklace was part of my mother's heirloom inheritance, as is the emerald bracelet currently on Miss Montgomery's wrist. Every eye in the room locked onto the shimmering emerald bracelet on Sienna's left wrist. My grandmother gave that bracelet to my mother on her 18th birthday, Tristan said softly. Miss Montgomery, you've worn it long enough. Give it back. Sienna instinctively clutched her wrist, trying to hide it. Tristan didn't move an inch to grab it. He simply stood over her like a judge awaiting compliance. Security, Tristan called out quietly. 2 burly security guards in dark suits stepped up onto the stage. Sienna's spirit broke completely. With shaking, tear-stained hands, she unclasped the emerald bracelet and placed it on the floor. It clinked softly against the hardwood. Tristan leaned down, picked it up, pulled a velvet cloth from his pocket, carefully wiped it clean, and walked over to me. Mom, he murmured, his eyes filled with pure warmth. Grandma's gift. I got it back for you. I took the bracelet and clasped it around my wrist. It fit perfectly. The ballroom erupted into thunderous, genuine applause, not polite, socialite clapping, but the roaring ovation for a decisive victory. People cheered. Women cried tears of catharsis. Alistair stood at the bottom of the stage, like a statue struck by lightning. The anger on his face was gone, replaced by a hollow, vacant shock. He stared at me, his mind completely shut down. I looked into his eyes, the same eyes that used to make my heart flutter decades ago. Now, there was nothing left inside them but ash. I leaned into the microphone one last time. Let the auction continue. I handed the mic back to the stunned auctioneer, took Tristan's arm, and walked off the stage. Behind us, Sienna's muffled, hysterical sobbing echoed across the room. I didn't turn back. Chapter 6. Collapse of an Empire didn't look back, but Alistair chased after us. His heavy footsteps echoed violently against the marble corridor outside the ballroom. Just as we reached the private exit, a rough hand clamped down on my wrist. His grip was so tight it bruised my skin. "Vivian!" Alistair's voice boomed above me, thick with suppressed rage. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" I turned slowly and looked at him. This man, whom I had once looked up to with love and respect, stood before me with veins bulging on his forehead. His tie was crooked, his eyes bloodshot with fury. He had always prided himself on his composure and restraint in public. Now, not a shred of it remained. "Let go of me," I said calmly. "You created a public circus back there, and you expect me to just let you walk away?" Alistair hissed through gritted teeth. "Do you have any idea what this does to the company's valuation? Do you know what the press is going to print tomorrow? Do you know what Sienna did to me tonight?" I countered, my voice deadpan. Alistair froze. "She drugged me," I said, staring straight into his eyes. "In our home. She brought me a bowl of broth. I drank it, and I woke up 2 hours ago unable to move my legs. She left me passed out in bed so she could wear my dress to your gala." "You're lying." Sienna's screech rang out from behind. She had stumbled off the stage, her hair wildly disheveled, clutching the torn hem of the champagne dress. She limped toward us, tears ruining her makeup. "Alistair, don't listen to her. I didn't do anything, didn't you?" Tristan stepped out from behind me, holding up his phone. "Should I play the audio file right now, Sienna?" Sienna's mouth snapped shut. "The recording of your call with the private investigator," Tristan recited mercilessly. "The wire transfers to the dark web pharmaceutical broker. The chat logs discussing how to administer a slow-acting toxin to my mother. Should I broadcast it over the Street Regis house speakers?" Sienna's face collapsed into absolute horror. She took a step back, bumping into Alistair, frantically clutching his arm. "Alistair, he's lying. Help me." Alistair didn't look at her. He stared at Tristan, a terrifying realization dawning in his eyes. "How long? How long have you known about this?" 2 years, Tristan answered smoothly. "Since the day you brought her into the executive suite." 2 years. That meant Tristan, as a 16-year-old boy, had already begun setting this trap. Alistair's throat hitched. He opened his mouth to say something, but the phone in his pocket buzzed violently. He yanked it out. The screen showed the name of Sterling Group's chief financial officer. Alistair answered, pressing it to his ear. "What?" "Alistair, we have a catastrophic emergency." The CFO's panicked voice leaked through the speaker so loudly I could hear every word. "Our corporate short option triggers were just executed. 3 offshore funds owned by Tristan Vance just dumped millions of short contracts on our stock. The share price is cratering in after-hours trading." Alistair's jaw dropped. "What?" "And the bank just called," the CFO yelled. "All corporate credit lines and your personal liquid accounts have been frozen by a court injunction for asset dissipation. Plus, Leonard Sterling just called an emergency board meeting for 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. 51% of voting stock has already been legally re-registered to Vivian Vance." 3 fatal blows, delivered in rapid succession. The phone slipped slightly in Alistair's hand. His face turned an ash-gray color. The almighty Alistair Sterling, the man who boasted that he controlled everything now, stood in the hallway slumped like a hollow paper tiger. "Tristan," Alistair's voice cracked, turning weak and raspy. "You're my son, aren't you?" "My name is Tristan Vance," my son replied simply. Those 5 words hit harder than any tirade. "I am your son, but I carry my mother's blood, and you never truly owned me." Alistair's shoulders slumped. He slid back against the wall, closing his eyes as his chest heaved heavily. "Do you know what shorting the company's stock means?" he rasped. "This company was my life's work. This company was built on my grandfather's seed capital," Tristan interrupted coldly. "Your father founded it, but my grandfather funded it. You signed the equity agreement 20 years ago, and you breached the terms. You lost. Control reverts to us. Those were your own rules." Alistair had no answer. The prenup was undeniable. He had signed it when he was young and arrogant, convinced he would never get caught, convinced he was invincible. He never imagined his own son would use it to destroy him 18 years later. Sienna stood beside him, completely bewildered. She didn't understand option trading or asset freezes, but she understood one thing. Alistair Sterling was broke. "Alistair, what's happening?" She grabbed his sleeve in panic. You told me the company was yours. You said we were going to buy the penthouse in Miami. Shut up! Alistair shoved her away violently. Sienna stumbled, hitting her shoulder hard against the wall. She gasped, tears flowing freely, but her eyes held no sadness, only blind, ugly terror. You lied to me, she screamed at him. You said you were going to divorce her. You said I was going to be the head of the household. If I told you the truth, would you have stayed? Alistair laughed bitterly, a terrifying, bloodshot look in his eyes. Sienna, did you stay with me because you cared about me? Or because of my money? You know the answer. Sienna's lips quivered. She couldn't say a word. All her leverage, Alistair's affection and his wealth had vanished. Love had turned into hatred, and wealth had turned into debt. I stood beside Tristan, watching the breakdown with strange detachment. For 2 years, I had wondered how I would feel when the truth finally came out. Rage? Joy? Vindication? I felt none of those things. I felt only a profound, quiet emptiness like a spring that had been compressed for too long, finally released. Alistair. I spoke up softly. He turned his head slowly to look at me, the fury in his eyes replaced by a pathetic, desperate regret. I've signed the divorce petition, I said. Arthur Vance will handle the division of property according to my father's original contract. Don't contact me, and don't contact Tristan. Vivian, please. Don't call my name, I said softly. You don't have the right anymore. I turned my back on him. Mom, Tristan said gently, stepping forward to drape his suit jacket over my shoulders. It's cold outside. His jacket was warm, heavy, and smelled of faint citrus and youth. It wrapped around me, shielding me from the chill of the night. The hotel doorman opened the glass doors for us. Outside, the Manhattan skyline glittered brightly, traffic flowing down Fifth Avenue like a river of gold. To the garage, Hank, Tristan instructed as we stepped into the waiting SUV. As Hank pulled the vehicle out of the service alley, I looked out the tinted window. A swarm of paparazzi had gathered at the main entrance, flashbulbs popping wildly as hotel security struggled to contain the media frenzy. Mom, Tristan said suddenly, looking at me. Are you mad at me? I turned to look at him. Streetlights flickered across his young profile, sharp, defined, carrying a maturity far beyond his 18 years. Why would I be mad at you? For orchestrating all of this tonight. For forcing your hand. Tristan paused, looking down at his hands. I started preparing this when I was 16. My breath caught. 16? That summer, I saw a text message on Dad's phone from Sienna, Tristan murmured, his voice icy. It said, "When is your wife going to die already?" My heart seized painfully in my chest. I brought the text to Dad back then, Tristan recalled, a bitter smile touching his lips. He told me his assistant was just making an inappropriate joke. That was the day I decided they were both going to pay. The SUV descended into an underground parking structure, the ambient light fading into shadow. I couldn't see Tristan's expression, but I could feel his hand trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the release of 2 years of suppressed burden. Tristan, I said gently, reaching out to clasp his hand. He turned to me. You did the right thing, I told him, holding his fingers tightly. You protected me. Tristan was silent for a long time before squeezing my hand back, a light, reassuring touch, just like when he was a little boy holding my finger. Mom, there's one last thing to handle, he said softly. What's that? Sienna. Tristan's eyes grew cold again. She bought poison. She tried to kill you. We can't let that go. The SUV came to a smooth stop in a private parking bay. Hank turned off the engine, leaving the cabin in tranquil silence. Tristan pulled out his phone and made a quick call. Nico, are the police in position? Detectives are at the Greenwich estate right now, boss, Nico replied. Tristan hung up and turned to me. Mom, wait in the car for a minute. You only need to watch this last part. Chapter 7. Justice and Bared Teeth. The SUV didn't drive home. Tristan had Hank park in the darkest corner of the secure structure, keeping the lights off. He pulled out his tablet and brought up another live camera feed, this one from the living room of our Greenwich estate. When did you install cameras in the house? I asked. 3 months ago, Tristan replied casually. I replaced the Wi-Fi router, the smoke detectors, and the digital picture frames. I stopped asking questions. On screen, the spacious living room was empty except for Mrs. Gable, who was clearing the coffee table. She carefully picked up the mug I had drunk from, placed it inside a sterile evidence bag, sealed it, and set it aside. It was Tristan's instruction. The mug contained traces of the heavy sedative, irrefutable physical evidence. 20 minutes later, the front doors banged open. Alistair stormed into the house, with Sienna stumbling right behind him. The train of my champagne dress was torn and muddy, and she was limping heavily. Her face was ruined by running mascara and smeared blood from a minor scrape on her forehead. She looked utterly wretched. "Alistair, please listen to me!" she wailed, reaching for him. "Listen to what?" Alistair spun around, bellowing in her face. "You humiliated me in front of the entire country tonight." "I humiliated you?" Sienna shrieked back. "Your brat of a son set us up." Slap! A sharp, violent crack echoed through the speakers. The force of Alistair's hand knocked Sienna onto the sofa. She clutched her swollen cheek, staring at him in utter disbelief. "Don't you dare speak about my son like that," Alistair growled, his voice deathly cold. I gasped slightly. "He was defending Tristan? You hit me?" Sienna trembled, her voice rising to a hysterical pitch. "Alistair, you laid a hand on me? What happened to everything you promised? You said you'd marry me. You said the company would be ours. You said she'd be gone. I said that would happen after she signed the voluntary settlement." Alistair sneered bitterly. "And what did you do? You idiot! You handed them every piece of evidence on a silver platter." "I did? Do you think I'm stupid?" Alistair pulled a manila envelope from his coat and slammed it onto the coffee table. "What is this Cayman Islands account? $3.8 million. Did you think I wouldn't find out?" Sienna's face turned deathly pale. She stared at the envelope, her lips quivering, unable to form a sentence. Alistair let out a harsh, cruel laugh. "Silent now? For 2 years I bought you Birkin bags, luxury cars, an apartment in Manhattan. Was that not enough for you? You had to steal from my corporate accounts too?" That was for our future," Sienna stammered frantically. "Our future?" Alistair's laughter grew louder, dripping with venomous sarcasm. "Whose future, Sienna? Yours? Or your 26-year-old gigolo hiding out in Miami?" Sienna froze. I froze too. "A gigolo? You thought I didn't know?" Alistair stepped toward her, glaring down at her like a predator. "Your ex-boyfriend, Pierce. You bought a luxury condo in South Beach under his name last year using my money. You wired funds to him every single month. You told me you were flying to Miami for market research. Were you conducting research in his bed?" The scene was appalling. Even Tristan raised an eyebrow in slight surprise. No. Sienna sobbed, shrinking back. Alistair grabbed her by the collar of my stolen dress, yanking her up. "I pulled the guest logs for that condo. Pierce has been living there for 8 months on my dime. You used my wealth to support another man." "It's not what you think," Sienna wailed. "What else could it be?" Alistair threw her back onto the cushions, adjusting his jacket with disgust. "You took my money to feed your side piece. How is that any different from what you accused Vivian of doing? I was trying to survive," Sienna shrieked. "And now I'm ruined," Alistair shouted back. "Tomorrow morning, the board strips my title. My assets are frozen. Do you think I give a damn about your excuses anymore?" Sienna collapsed onto the sofa like a broken rag doll. Just then, a light tap sounded against our SUV window. Tristan rolled it down. A man in a dark hoodie handed a thick legal folder inside, nodded silently to Tristan, and vanished into the shadows. "Let's head up to the house," Tristan told Hank. As the SUV pulled up to the main driveway, Tristan flipped through the new documents and handed them to me. "This is what Nico compiled." I took the pages. The first page contained the full text logs between Sienna and the private investigator from her initial inquiry to the dark web purchase order for the slow-acting poison, complete with timestamps and Bitcoin transaction IDs. Ironclad evidence. The second page featured surveillance photos of Sienna and Pierce embracing outside a Miami resort 3 months ago, taken during a trip where she claimed to be visiting her sick mother. The third page listed bank statements showing over $1 million transferred directly from Alistair's corporate slush fund to Pierce's personal account. She had played the innocent, devoted mistress to Alistair, while using his fortune to maintain a secret lover in Florida for 2 straight years. I closed the folder and looked out the window. The SUV stopped at the front gates of our Greenwich estate. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the living room, the two silhouettes were still visible. Alistair stood towering over the couch, while Sienna knelt on the rug, clutching at his pants leg, weeping frantically. Alistair stood unmoving, dead to her pleas. "Mom." Tristan opened his door and turned to me. "Wait in the car. I'm coming with you." Tristan looked at me for a second, then nodded, helping me out of the vehicle. When we pushed open the heavy front doors, the living room fell dead silent. Sienna was still on her knees. Seeing us walk in, her face twisted in pure horror. She instinctively tried to scramble backward, but her legs gave out, and she collapsed onto the floorboards. Alistair turned around. The rage in his eyes had burned out, leaving behind only profound exhaustion and defeat. "Why are you here?" he asked hoarsely. "To pack my things," I said coldly. "What things?" "My personal belongings. I'm going up to the master suite. Nothing that belongs to Vivian Vance will remain in this house." Tristan didn't follow me upstairs. He remained standing in the center of the living room, facing Alistair and Sienna. He placed the new dossier onto the coffee table with a soft thud. "Here is the complete criminal file on Miss Montgomery," Tristan stated calmly. "The chat logs, the dark web transactions, the bank transfers, the hotel footage. My legal team has already turned everything over to the district attorney's office." Sienna's eyes darted to the folder, her pupils shrinking in terror. "What do you want, Tristan?" Alistair asked, his voice sounding like sandpaper. "I don't want anything from you," Tristan replied smoothly. "I'm simply informing you that detectives are on their way. Miss Montgomery is being formally charged with attempted murder, grand larceny, and corporate embezzlement. The private investigator has signed a full confession, and the drug broker was apprehended an hour ago." Sienna let out a blood-curdling shriek. She lunged toward the table, clawing frantically for the folder. Tristan didn't even flinch. He simply took half a step back. Sienna missed, crashing face. First onto the hard floor, splitting her eyebrow against the corner of the table. Blood trickled down her face. "You can't do this to me," she screamed, her eyes wild with madness. "Alistair, save me! You promised you loved me." Alistair didn't move. He stood looking down at her bleeding face with complete indifference. No pity, no anger, just a hollow void. "I said I loved you, didn't I?" Alistair murmured, a tragic, broken smile touching his lips. "Sienna, because of my love for you, I lost my wife, my son, and the company I built with my own hands. And all the while, you were using my money to fund another man." He turned his back on her. "Take her away. I never want to see her face again." "That's up to the police," Tristan said coldly. He turned toward the stairs and called up, "Mom, are you ready?" I walked down the grand staircase carrying a single, small, leather suitcase. It was the same suitcase I had brought with me when I moved into this house 7 years ago. Inside were a few heirlooms from my grandmother, family photos of my father, and the hospital ID bracelet Tristan wore the day he was born. The designer clothes, the luxury bags, the diamond watches Alistair had bought me over the years, I left them all behind. I didn't want a single reminder. "Let's go," I said. Tristan took the suitcase from my hand and offered his arm. As we walked toward the foyer, Alistair remained standing by the window, his back turned to us, his shoulders hunched. "Alistair?" I paused near the doorway. He didn't turn around. "The broth Sienna gave me tonight contained heavy sedatives," I said quietly. "Mrs. Gable preserved the mug and handed it to the police. If you want to prove you weren't an accomplice to my attempted murder, I suggest you cooperate fully with the detectives." His shoulders shuddered, as if he wanted to turn back, but he couldn't bring himself to do it. "Vivian." His voice was a muffled rasp from deep in his throat. "If I tell you, I truly didn't know she was trying to poison you. Would you believe me?" I looked at his slumping back for 3 seconds. "I believe you didn't know," I said softly, "but being ignorant doesn't make you innocent." Alistair said nothing more. I took Tristan's arm and stepped out into the dark night. Behind us, Sienna's hysterical wails and Alistair's hollow silence faded into the distance. The mansion that had once been my home shrank in the side mirror of the SUV until it dissolved into a tiny speck of light. "Where are we going, Mom?" Tristan asked as Hank drove us down the estate road. "To a hotel?" We can look for a rental apartment tomorrow. No need to look. Tristan pulled out his phone, tapped the screen, and showed it to me. I bought a place 3 months ago. On the screen was a photograph of a stunning, light-filled penthouse overlooking the East River. Through the floor-to-ceiling glass windows, the entire Manhattan skyline glittered. And on the deed of ownership, the name printed clearly was Vivian Vance. I stared at the screen, my eyes stinging with tears, not of grief, but of profound gratitude. My son, 3 months ago, while I was still trapped in despair, he had already built a bridge to carry me to safety. Chapter 8. Unmasked. Before our SUV even cleared the Greenwich town limits, Tristan's tablet chimed with a notification. He glanced down, frowned slightly, and handed it to me. The live camera feed inside the estate living room was still running. What unfolded after our departure was even uglier than what had come before. Sienna had dragged herself up from the floor, blood from her forehead smearing across her cheek. But physical pain was the last thing on her mind. She threw herself at Alistair, grabbing his tuxedo lapels, her nails digging into his suit. "What did you just say?" she shrieked hysterically. "You said you never want to see me again?" Alistair shoved her hands off him and turned away. "Are you deaf?" Madness took over Sienna's face. She rushed around him, beating her fists against his chest. "Alistair Sterling, who the hell do you think you are? You think you still have the right to dump me?" Alistair looked down at her, genuine shock in his eyes. He had probably never seen this side of her. For 2 years, she had played the delicate, sweet, submissive angel who worshipped the ground he walked on. Now, standing before him was a bleeding, grotesque creature consumed by unmasked greed and rage. "Look at you," Sienna spat, backing away and pointing a bloody finger at him. "You think you still have money? You think you still have a company? Your wife is gone, your son destroyed you, and your board is kicking you to the curb." "Shut up," Alistair growled. "I won't shut up!" Sienna's voice reached a fever pitch. "Stop playing the grand billionaire. You promised you'd marry me. Where is the penthouse you promised? You put the Manhattan condo under your company's name, not mine. The cars were leased. All the money you gave me wasn't even a fraction of what you lose in a single night at the tables in Macau." Alistair's expression darkened. He hadn't expected her to have kept such precise score. "Did you really think I believed you loved me?" Sienna sneered, her voice dripping with poison. "You couldn't even keep a class act like Vivian Vance. How were you ever going to keep me?" "I said shut up." Alistair slammed his fist onto the marble bar. The crystal glasses rattled and shattered onto the floor. The loud crash startled Sienna into taking half a step back, but she quickly straightened up, her face twisting into a malicious grin. "Why are you yelling at me?" she taunted. "Did I say something wrong? You acted like some omnipotent corporate king in front of me, promising you'd leave your wife. And what happened? 3 years later, you're broke, exposed, and stripped of your shares. You're nothing but a pathetic, weak old man who only knows how to make empty promises." Alistair's face flushed a dangerous purple. "What did you call me?" "I called you a loser." Sienna enunciated every syllable with venom. "Your 18-year-old son played you like a cheap fiddle from day one. He ran circles around you while you boasted about your strategic vision. Your money, your legacy, your pride. He turned it all into dust." Alistair's hands trembled violently, not from anger, but because she had struck the single most fragile part of his ego, his reputation as a brilliant, invincible titan of industry. Sienna was ripping off his mask piece by piece. "Do you want to know why I despise you most of all?" Sienna stepped closer, ignoring the blood dripping onto her collar. "Not because you're broke now, but because you're stupid. You were married to a woman like Vivian Vance, a woman of class, pedigree, and wealth, who bore you a genius son. And what did you do? You threw her away for a girl like me." She burst into a chilling, hysterical laugh that echoed through the empty mansion. "Did you actually think I loved you, Alistair?" She tilted her head, mocking him. "You're in your late 40s. Did you honestly believe a 25-year-old girl fell in love with your personality?" Alistair's face shattered completely. The realization hit him like a physical blow. Every decision he had made over the last 2 years, every sacrifice, every betrayal, it had all been a delusion. He had humiliated his wife, alienated his son, and alienated his allies, all for a woman who viewed him as a pathetic mark. You lied to me." Alistair's voice was barely a whisper. "Of course I lied. Sienna laughed mockingly. Did you think you were clever when you lied to Vivian? Alistair, you and I are the exact same kind of trash. Except you're even more pathetic because you still think you're the victim. A heavy silence fell over the living room. And then, Alistair suddenly started to laugh, a low, raspy, broken sound like rusted metal grinding together. It was a laugh of total self-derision. Good, well said. He nodded slowly, the light in his eyes completely extinguishing. Sienna, for 2 years, I was a blind fool. He turned to the bar, grabbed an open bottle of Macallan 25, and took a heavy swig straight from the neck. What else do you want to say? Go ahead, get it all out tonight. Sienna hadn't expected him to break so completely. She hesitated for a second, but then her face hardened into icy contempt. Since you asked, I'll tell you. She wiped the blood from her brow with a cloth. Pierce and I have been together for 6 years. You were nothing to me but an ATM. Alistair took another long swig of scotch, his throat working heavily, saying nothing. I asked Vivian to get me a job at Sterling Group because I knew she married money. Sienna leaned against the sofa, dropping all pretense. The plan was simple. Drain enough cash from you to buy a villa in Florida and start a business with Pierce. That was it. But you were so easy. All I had to do was stroke your ego, cry about my hard life, and you came running, showering me with bags and cars. She smirked cruelly. Do you know what I did every time you complained to me about Vivian? I laughed behind your back. I laughed at how blind you were. A woman like your wife could have had any powerful man in the city, and you dragged her through the dirt for me. Alistair slammed the crystal bottle down onto the bar counter with a dull thud. And the poison? He asked, his voice suddenly dropping to a whisper. You drugged her. You bought slow-acting poison to kill her slowly. Was that for money too? Sienna's cruel smile froze. You can answer that question at the precinct. Miss Montgomery. A stern voice boomed from the foyer. The front doors swung open, and 3 uniformed NYPD officers, accompanied by 2 plainclothes detectives, stepped into the room. The lead detective flashed his badge. Sienna Montgomery, NYPD Homicide Task Force. You are under arrest for grand larceny, criminal possession of a controlled substance, and attempted murder. Hands behind your back. Every drop of blood drained from Sienna's face. She spun around toward Alistair, a desperate, pathetic plea in her eyes. Alistair, help me. Tell them it's a mistake. Alistair didn't move. He stood leaning against the bar, clutching his bottle of scotch, staring at her with dead, hollow eyes. Alistair! Please! She shrieked as the handcuffs clicked tightly around her wrists. You said it yourself. Alistair whispered, turning his gaze away. I'm a pathetic loser. And a loser can't help you. Sienna's screams turned into feral, hysterical shrieks as the officers dragged her toward the entrance. She kicked, struggled, and cursed, her tears smearing the blood across her face, stripping away every last shred of her dignity. You can't arrest me! He cheated too. He committed fraud. Why aren't you arresting him? Infidelity is a civil matter, ma'am, the detective replied coolly, shoving her into the back of the squad car. Attempted murder is a felony. The heavy squad car door slammed shut, cutting off her screams. Inside the quiet mansion, Alistair stood alone in the dim light of the bar. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the red and blue emergency lights flashed silently against the walls, painting the room in bloody hues. He suddenly threw the crystal scotch bottle against the wall. Glass and amber liquid shattered across the floorboards. Slowly, he slid down against the bar, burying his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking uncontrollably. Mom, Tristan asked quietly, do you want to keep watching? I looked away from the screen, leaning back against the leather seat of the SUV. No. Turn it off. Tristan shut down the tablet. Silence settled over the vehicle as we glided smoothly through the night. After a long time, Tristan spoke again. Mom, do you feel sorry for him? I thought about it for a moment, looking out at the city lights. No, I said softly. Everyone must pay for the choices they make. Tristan didn't say anything, but he reached over and placed his hand over mine. His hand was large. His knuckles defined the hand of a grown man now, but the way he held mine was the exact same as when he was a boy, offering a quiet, unspoken promise. Mom, don't be afraid. Can we move into the new apartment tonight? I asked. Everything is ready, Tristan smiled. I had a cleaning crew prepare it yesterday. All new clothes in your size are in the closet, and I imported your favorite goose down pillows from Paris. I turned to look at him, my heart swelling. You bought that penthouse 3 months ago? Yes. Why were you so sure I would leave? Tristan went quiet for a moment, gazing out the window at the passing lights. I wasn't sure. I just thought, even if you didn't need it, at least I would have it ready, so that the day you finally decided you were ready to break free, you would always have a place to land. Tears blurred my vision. Since he was 16, this child had carried the weight of our lives on his young shoulders. He had watched me endure, watched me fade away in that house, and without saying a word, he had spent every night quietly building an escape route for us. He wasn't just my son, he was my guardian angel. Mom, look, Tristan pointed ahead. That's our new home. The SUV pulled onto the East River Esplanade. Ahead of us stood a sleek, silver glass tower overlooking the water. On the top floor, behind grand floor-to-ceiling windows, a warm, golden light was glowing in the dark. It was a light waiting just for us. Chapter 9. A single sheet of paper. The interior of the penthouse was bathed in a warm, welcoming light. When I stepped through the front door, I stopped in awe. The living room was designed in soft, muted neutrals, dominated by a massive panoramic window that framed the East River and the glittering Manhattan skyline beyond. The sofa was upholstered in the exact cream-colored linen I loved, and on the marble coffee table stood a vase of fresh white lisianthus, dewdrops still glistening on the petals. Ma'am, you've arrived! A familiar voice called out from the kitchen. Mrs. Gable stepped out wearing an apron, holding a steaming bowl of soup. Mrs. Gable? What are you doing here? I asked in surprise. Young Mr. Tristan asked me to relocate here permanently. Mrs. Gable smiled, her eyes slightly red. He was worried you'd feel lonely in a new place, so he hired me away from the Greenwich estate. I looked over at Tristan. He was taking off his shoes near the entryway, his head down, pretending he didn't hear a word. And ma'am, Mrs. Gable gestured toward a built-in display cabinet in the corner of the living room. Mr. Tristan had all your personal keepsakes brought over. I walked over and looked through the glass. Neatly arranged inside were my grandmother's heirloom emeralds, a framed photograph of my late father, Tristan's newborn hospital bracelet, and my college leather journal. I had left those precious items behind in the Greenwich mansion during our rushed exit, assuming they were lost forever. When did you move all this? I asked Tristan. While you were at the street. Regis, ma'am, Mrs. Gable answered quickly. Mr. Tristan hired a white-glove moving crew to pack up all your personal heirlooms. He told them to bring what mattered and leave the rest behind for the liquidators. And Alistair? Mr. Sterling was locked in his study upstairs the whole time, Mrs. Gable whispered. He didn't even notice. She set the bowl down on the table. Ma'am, drink some broth while it's hot. I simmered it for 3 hours. I sat at the dining table and picked up the spoon. It was chicken consommé with herbs, the exact comfort meal she used to make for me after I gave birth to Tristan. She had remembered my preference for 18 years. Tristan sat across from me, pulling out his phone. Mom, Mr. Vance called. We need to be at his office tomorrow morning at 9 to sign the final structural agreements. What agreements? The formal transfer of voting shares, the notarized divorce decree, and the asset division order. Dad received his court summons today. He'll be there. Tristan's tone was matter of fact. He has to be. If he defaults, the judge signs the order in absentia. Outside the window, the river flowed silently, reflecting the golden lights of the city. I ate the warm soup, feeling a deep, long-forgotten tranquility spread through my body. There was no suffocating tension here, no heavy footsteps from an unfaithful husband, no fake, sugary laughter from a treacherous friend. Just the soft hum of the city and the presence of my son. This was my home. Get some rest, Mom, Tristan said, standing up. Tomorrow is the final stretch. That night I slept deeply. The mattress was firm, the pillows comfortable, and the duvet smelled of fresh linen. No nightmares, no sudden panic, no lingering dread. I hadn't slept like that in years. The next morning, inside the high-rise conference room at Vance & Associates, sunlight streamed through the blinds, casting crisp golden bars across the mahogany table. I sat at the head of the table, wearing my midnight black suit. My hair swept into an elegant chignon, wearing no jewelry except for bold red lipstick. Tristan sat beside me, an iPad and several legal folders stacked neatly in front of him. Alistair arrived 15 minutes late. When he walked through the door, I barely recognized him. In a single night, he seemed to have aged a decade. Stubble covered his jaw, his eyes were sunken and bloodshot, his collar unbuttoned, and his suit jacket rumpled. He looked around the room, his eyes finally landing on me. His lips parted slightly, but no words came out. Behind him walked his corporate attorney, looking utterly defeated. Sienna was nowhere to be seen. "Mr. Sterling, please take a seat." Arthur Vance pointed to the chair across from us. Alistair sat down heavily, his lawyer taking the seat beside him. A heavy silence settled over the room. "Today, we are executing 3 final instruments," Arthur Vance announced officially, opening his briefcase. First, the enforcement order for the 2004 prenuptial agreement. Due to established marital infidelity, 51% of all voting shares in Sterling Group are hereby transferred to Vivian Vance and Tristan Vance. Objection, Alistair's attorney raised a hand weakly. "The infidelity evidence has not been adjudicated in court. The evidence has already been submitted to the family court and validated by forensic experts." Arthur Vance interrupted smoothly, sliding a thick stack of certified documents across the table. Photos, hotel logs, financial records, and sworn affidavits from witnesses. "If you wish to contest it in court, we welcome a public trial. But legally, the transfer clause is triggered automatically." Alistair's attorney reviewed the documents, his expression darkening with every page. He leaned over and whispered something into Alistair's ear. Alistair's shoulders slumped lower. "No objections," he rasped. "Very well." Arthur turned the page. Second, the final divorce decree and property division. Mrs. Vance has already executed the agreement. It includes the dissolution of marriage, sole custody waiving since the child is of legal age, and the division of marital property according to the prenuptial terms. Arthur slid the bound document toward Alistair. Alistair stared down at the paper, his knuckles turning white against the wooden table. He didn't pick up the pen. Instead, he raised his bloodshot eyes and looked directly at me. "Vivian." His voice was so hoarse it was barely audible. "Can we speak in private? Just for 5 minutes?" Tristan started to lean forward, but I placed a gentle hand on his arm. "Say whatever you have to say right here," I told Alistair coldly. Alistair looked at the attorneys in the room, his throat working heavily. "For the past 2 years, I was wrong," he finally choked out. The room fell so still you could hear the ticking of the wall clock. "I know, it's too late for apologies," Alistair continued, staring at me with desperate eyes. "But I need you to know. I truly had no idea Sienna was planning to poison you." "What did you think was going to happen, Alistair?" I asked calmly. "Did you think I would quietly sign away my life's work and give you two my blessing?" Alistair opened his mouth, but couldn't form an answer. "You thought Sienna was sweet and devoted, and that I was just a cold, nagging burden," I said, my voice as even as an auditor reading a financial report. "You thought she loved you for who you were, and that I was just holding on to your status. Alistair, your biggest mistake was never just your infidelity. It was that you were too foolish to see when you were being played." Alistair's face flushed, as if he had been slapped in public. "Sign the papers," I said flatly. He lowered his head, picked up the pen with trembling fingers, and pressed the tip to the paper. His signature was shaky and jagged, a bitter end to a 20-year marriage. Third document. Arthur Vance pushed the final stack forward without giving him a moment to process. The formal corporate resolution re-registering voting control. Mr. Sterling must sign as the relinquishing party. Alistair looked at the document and suddenly let out a dry, helpless laugh. "This company? My father built this company. My grandfather funded this company," Tristan cut in coldly. Alistair snapped his head up, looking at his son with a mixture of grief and resentment. "Tristan, did you ever once consider me your father?" Tristan was silent for 3 seconds. "When I was 8 years old, I took first place in the state math Olympiad," Tristan said, his voice flat and measured. "You promised to take me to the amusement park to celebrate. I stood by the front door for 3 hours wearing my new shoes. You never showed up because Sienna claimed she had a bad headache, and you took her out to dinner instead." Alistair froze. "When I was 10, Mom had a dangerous fever of 104, Tristan continued. I called your cell phone 12 times. You never picked up. That night, you posted a photo on Instagram showing you and Sienna skiing in Aspen. Alistair's lips began to quiver. When I was 13, Grandpa passed away. Tristan stood up, leaning his palms on the conference table, staring down at his father from above. You arrived 2 hours late to his funeral, claiming your flight was delayed. But I checked the flight logs, you never booked a flight. You were throwing Sienna a birthday party at a beach club. Tristan's voice remained calm, but every word fell like a heavy iron anvil. You ask if I ever considered you my father? I ask you, did you ever once act like one? Alistair's face turned completely ghostly. His attorney wiped sweat from his brow, while Arthur Vance lowered his head, quietly reviewing the files. Sunlight cut through the blinds, casting a long, dark shadow from Tristan across the table. Alistair didn't say another word. He grabbed the pen, scribbled his name on the share transfer, and dropped the pen onto the mahogany table with a soft click. He stood up, swaying slightly, catching himself on the edge of the table. His attorney reached out to support him, but Alistair shoved his hand away. I'm leaving, Alistair rasped, his voice sounding hollow and distant. Vivian. I'm sorry. He walked slowly toward the exit, his shoes dragging against the floor. At the door, he paused, looking back with empty eyes. My personal accounts are frozen. The Greenwich house is seized. I spent last night sleeping in my car. Can I at least? No, you can't. Tristan cut him off ruthlessly. Every asset you possessed was marital property. It now belongs entirely to my mother. Alistair closed his eyes, turned the handle, and walked out. His slow, heavy footsteps echoed down the hallway until the elevator doors chimed shut. The conference room remained quiet for a long time. All documents are fully executed, Arthur Vance said softly. Vivian, as of this morning, 51% of Sterling Group's voting stock belongs to you and Tristan. Transfer my entire share allocation to Tristan, I said immediately. Mom? Tristan turned to look at me in surprise. That company is the Sterling legacy. I looked into my son's eyes. I have no interest in running it. But you do. You have both the talent and the right. Tristan hesitated, then shook his head. Mom, that's not fair to you. I decide what's fair for me. I stood up, smoothing my jacket. I don't want corporate shares, Tristan. I wanted my freedom. And I have it now. Tristan stared at me, a profound light gleaming in his eyes. He took a deep breath and didn't argue further. All right, he smiled. Then I have a gift for you. He pulled out his phone, played a video, and turned the screen toward me. It was a live press conference from the local district attorney's office. On screen, a woman in an orange jumpsuit with her hair cut short was being escorted past press cameras in handcuffs. It was Sienna. Beside her were Pierce and the dark web pharmaceutical broker, both in cuffs. Last night, law enforcement executed a sweeping raid, the news anchor announced. Sienna Montgomery, along with 2 co-conspirators, has been formally indicted on charges of attempted murder via controlled substances, wire fraud, and grand larceny. The district attorney confirms they face up to 15 years in federal prison. On the video, Sienna desperately ducked her head to hide from the flashbulbs, looking utterly terrified and broken. I closed the video and handed the phone back to Tristan. Sunlight flooded the conference room, making the air feel crisp, clean, and clear. Let's go, I said, reaching out to take his arm. Where to? Tristan asked. Home, I smiled. To our new home. Chapter 10. Coronation, 3 months later. The trees along the East River Esplanade had turned a brilliant, golden amber, their leaves rustling softly in the crisp autumn breeze. I stood by the panoramic window of my penthouse, watching a private yacht glide slowly across the water, its lights twinkling like diamonds against the dusk. Mrs. Vance, it's time, my executive assistant, Sarah, announced gently from the doorway, holding a leather folio. The product launch for the new electric vehicle line begins at 7. The press corps has already filled the auditorium. I turned away from the window and adjusted my lapel in the mirror. Tonight, I wore a tailored, ivory-white pantsuit. On my lapel pinned a stunning, custom-designed emerald brooch crafted from my grandmother's vintage bracelet. The bracelet had been fragile, but transformed into a brooch. It was a daily statement of resilience. Let's go, I said. Sarah walked beside me, briefing me as we rode down the private elevator. We have over 50 major media outlets attending tonight. CNBC is broadcasting live. Mr. Tristan said he will arrive directly from campus around 6:40. Is he driving himself? I asked with a smile. Yes, Sarah grinned. Mr. Tristan passed his driving test last month and bought a dark navy Maybach. He insisted that his first official passenger had to be you. I chuckled softly. 3 months. It wasn't a long time, yet it was long enough to transform a life completely. When I stepped out of the lobby and slid into the back of my white Bentley, I felt no lingering exhaustion, only a light, weightless sense of freedom. The product launch was held in the grand auditorium on the top floor of the downtown headquarters. The building was no longer called Sterling Group. Last month, at an emergency shareholder meeting, Tristan was unanimously elected chairman of the board. His first official act was to rename the conglomerate Vance Holdings in honor of my father's legacy and my name. Alistair hadn't attended that board meeting. He had submitted a 2-line resignation letter through his bankruptcy attorney. Due to personal circumstances, I resign all corporate titles effective immediately. His signature had been barely legible. I hadn't seen him since that day in the law firm. Arthur Vance mentioned in passing that Alistair was living in a small, rented studio on the outskirts of Queens, trying to make ends meet by offering freelance financial consulting to local small businesses. All his personal assets had been liquidated during the divorce settlement, including the Greenwich estate. On the day the Greenwich mansion was put up for public auction, Tristan bought it back through a foundation, donating the entire property to the city as a residential rehabilitation center for children with autism. We've arrived, Mrs. Vance. Hank's voice brought me back from my thoughts. The car stopped outside the glowing glass entrance of Vance Holdings. The architecture was familiar, but the grand silver emblem above the doors now read, VH. As I stepped onto the red carpet, a barrage of camera flashes lit up the night. Reporters pushed against the velvet ropes, shouting questions over one another. Mrs. Vance, look over here. Mrs. Vance, is it true you personally oversaw the brand redirection for Vance Holdings? Mrs. Vance, Sienna Montgomery's trial begins next week. Will you be testifying in person? I didn't answer a single question. I simply offered a gracious, polite smile, nodded to the press, and walked smoothly into the lobby. The private elevator whisked me up to the top floor. Standing outside the auditorium doors was Tristan. He wore a sharp charcoal suit paired with the deep burgundy silk tie I had given him. His hair was styled back, his features growing more defined and masculine with each passing month. The boyhood awkwardness was completely gone, replaced by a formidable, quiet authority. Yet, when he saw me, his face broke into that familiar, brilliant smile. Mom, he extended his arm. You look magnificent tonight. And you look very handsome, Mr. Chairman. I laughed softly, taking his arm. How are classes going? Aced my midterms. Tristan rubbed his nose casually. Oh, and my acceptance letter from Harvard Business School arrived this afternoon. I stopped in my tracks, looking at him in awe. You got into Harvard Business? Yeah. Tristan smiled. I submitted my application last fall during the middle of the legal filings. Took the GMAT on a weekend break between meeting with Arthur Vance. I stared at my son, momentarily speechless. Last autumn, while orchestrating a high-stakes corporate takeover, gathering criminal evidence, and managing short positions, he had casually applied to and gotten accepted by the top business school in the world. You're insane, I said fondly. Maybe a little, Tristan grinned. But Mom, I'm deferring my enrollment for 2 years. Why? Because Vance Holdings just started its new chapter. Tristan looked toward the bustling auditorium. I need to build its foundation first. That's my responsibility. I looked at my son, my heart brimming with pride. Let's go, Tristan. The launch is starting. The event was a resounding success. Under the glaring stage spotlights, the sleek, aerodynamic prototype of our new electric vehicle slowly rotated on a glass platform, its metallic finish reflecting the light beautifully. I stood on stage before hundreds of investors, board members, and journalists, holding the microphone with steady grace. Thank you all for joining us tonight for the launch of Vance Holdings' flagship project. My voice resonated clearly through the hall. This vehicle represents our very first innovation under our new banner. Its official model name is Resurgence. Thunderous applause echoed through the auditorium. Why Resurgence? I looked out at the sea of faces, my gaze lingering lovingly on Tristan. Because Vance Holdings itself is a story of resurgence. 3 months ago, this institution carried a different name and a different path. Today, we stand here with new leadership, a new vision, and an unwavering commitment to the future. And our message is simple. Always look forward. Always move forward. No matter what storms you face in the past, as long as you have the courage to stand up, you can build a new kingdom. The room erupted into a standing ovation. When I stepped off the stage, Tristan was waiting in the wings with a bottle of water. "Mom, you delivered that speech way better than the script I wrote." "You wrote the draft," I smiled. "I just spoke from the heart." Sincerity always resonates more than polished rhetoric. During the cocktail reception that followed, I mingled with executives and city officials, sipping champagne, graciously accepting congratulations. I had learned to navigate this world not as a trophy wife standing in the shadows, but as the principal figure standing in the light. By 9:30, the reception began to wind down. After seeing off the last group of international distributors, I stepped out onto the top-floor terrace to take in the cool night air. The city lights stretched out before me like an endless ocean of stars. Mom, Tristan, walked out onto the balcony, holding his phone. "Nico just sent an update regarding the trial." "What happened?" "Sienna was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison without parole," Tristan reported. "Pierce received 8 years for criminal conspiracy, and the drug broker got 20. I nodded slowly, feeling no surge of triumph, only a quiet sense of finality. Over the past 3 months, the name Sienna Montgomery had transformed from a painful thorn in my heart into an irrelevant footnote. I didn't hate her anymore. Hatred required energy, and I had a life to live. "There's one more thing," Tristan added, looking down at his screen. "Nico said Dad was sitting in the back row of the courtroom today." I paused. "Alistair was there?" "Yes," Tristan said softly. "Nico said he was wearing a plain gray jacket, looked very thin, and sat quietly in the last row. As soon as the judge read the verdict, he left alone without speaking to anyone. I looked out at the distant river in silence. Once upon a time, the name Alistair Sterling was the center of my universe. It had the power to make me laugh, cry, and lie awake in agony through endless nights. But now, hearing his name felt like reading about a stranger in a faded newspaper clipping. The past was truly past. "Let me take you home, Mom," Tristan said gently. We walked down to the private entrance where Hank had pulled up the dark navy Maybach. Tristan opened the door for me, his movements polished and attentive. As the car pulled away from the curb and merged onto the avenue, my eyes caught a lonely figure standing across the street under a dim streetlight. It was a man in a worn gray jacket. He was thin, his hair cut short and silvered at the temples, carrying a plastic bag filled with cheap takeout containers. It was Alistair. He was standing on the sidewalk, staring across the traffic toward our car. His eyes locked onto Tristan and me through the window. The street lamp cast a long, frail shadow behind him. His lips moved slightly as the car glided past. From that distance, I couldn't hear him, but I could easily read his lips. He was saying, "I'm sorry." The car didn't slow down. Tristan didn't even turn his head toward the sidewalk. He simply reached out, his warm, strong hand gently covering mine. "Mom," Tristan smiled softly. "Tomorrow, I'm taking you on that highway drive. New license, new car, right along the coast." I withdrew my gaze from the side mirror, looked at my son's sharp, confident profile, and smiled from the bottom of my heart. I'd love that. The Maybach accelerated smoothly, merging into the glowing stream of Manhattan traffic. In the rearview mirror, the frail gray figure grew smaller and smaller, until it finally dissolved completely into the endless lights of the city. 3 months ago, I lost a toxic marriage, a life I thought was my destiny. 3 months later, I possessed my own legacy, a brilliant son who stood as my protector, and a glorious, unwritten future. I reached up, gently adjusting the emerald brooch on my lapel. Under the soft cabin lights, the jewel gleamed with a fierce, indestructible green fire. "Mom," Tristan said suddenly, looking over with a grin, "the National Women in Business Summit is hosting their keynote next month. The organizers sent a formal invitation asking if you'd deliver the opening address." "What's the topic?" I asked. "The topic is reclaiming your life from zero." They specifically requested Mrs. Vivian Vance. I looked out at the open road ahead, a bright, triumphant smile touching my lips. Tell them I'll be there.